I still remember the sound of the spoon clinking against the china teacup when my mother dropped it. We were sitting at our usual Sunday dinner table, the kind that held years of family celebrations and awkward silences. I had just finished sharing my plans to finally launch my own investment firm after a decade of working in silence, saving aggressively, and waiting for the trust fund my grandmother left me to become accessible. That money, $5 million, was meant to be my launch pad. My grandmother had said it herself, for Catherine when she's ready to lead. But then came my father's voice, calm and casual, like he was reading off a grocery list. "We've decided to give the trust to Nathan," he said. "He's struggling more, and we believe it's the right thing for the family." I blinked, thinking I'd misheard. But my mother nodded in agreement, sipping her wine like nothing monumental had just been said. Nathan didn't even meet my eyes. He just smirked, like it was inevitable, like this had been planned for months. I asked them why. My father shrugged. "You're doing fine, Catherine. You always figure it out. Nathan needs this more." That's when I realized this wasn't just favoritism, it was betrayal. A deliberate choice to take something that was mine and hand it to the son who had already bankrupted 2 startups and embarrassed our family name more times than I could count. I stood up slow and silent, my hands trembling as I picked up my purse. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just said thank you for the clarity and walked out of the house I helped maintain with my own money. As I stepped into the cold night air, one truth settled in my chest like fire. They didn't just take my inheritance, they lit the match that would burn every illusion I had left about what family means. And from that moment forward, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat by the window of my apartment, watching the Denver skyline blur through tears I refused to let fall. My mind kept replaying the scene at that dinner table like a broken record etched into my bones. They hadn't just taken the trust fund, they'd taken my belief that I mattered to them beyond convenience. For years, I had sacrificed. I paid off one of their second mortgages, helped Nathan settle legal fees after his second failed business, and sent money home just to help out. I told myself that's what family did. But deep down, I was funding dysfunction while silencing my own dreams. That stopped now. I canceled my weekend trip. I pulled out my whiteboard. I wrote one word in bold red letters, build, and I meant it this time for myself. I crunched every number, leveraged the few investments I had left, and sold my car. I walked to client meetings in heels through the snow for weeks, pitching hard, listening harder. I started with 1 account, then 3, then 5. I barely slept, I barely ate, but I felt more alive than I had in years. Every rejection fueled me. Every win reminded me that my value wasn't something they could redistribute at dinner. If you've ever had to rebuild from betrayal, especially when it comes from blood, drop a yes in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this one where the quiet ones finally rise. 3 months in, I landed a high-risk portfolio no one else would touch. I saw what others missed, a company on the verge of collapse, but with deep underlying value. I poured everything into it. It was a gamble, yes, but it was mine. When the company rebounded 6 weeks later, my shares tripled in value overnight. That one deal gave me the seed money I needed to register Ironbridge Capital. My own firm. My own terms. No more begging for support. No more playing small to keep peace in a family that never truly saw me. I was done asking for permission to matter. Now I was ready to prove I always had. By the time Ironbridge Capital hit its 6th month, we weren't just surviving, we were growing faster than I ever imagined. I had 3 analysts, a legal advisor, and a modest but buzzing office in the heart of Denver. Clients came in droves, not because we promised miracles, but because I gave them what no one else would: truth, clarity, and grit. I thought I was done with my family emotionally and professionally, but life, as always, has its own way of circling back. One morning, I got a call from a distressed former accountant I'd worked with years ago. "Catherine, I think you need to see this." Attached was a confidential report on Sinclair Dynamics, my family's legacy business. It showed hemorrhaging losses, back-to-back lawsuits, and most disturbingly, shady transfers from the company's pension fund. The CEO, Nathan. Of course. It was poetic in a twisted way. My brother had been handed $5 million and full control of the company, and now both were on the verge of vanishing. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt fury. Not just at the recklessness, but at the silence. No one had called me. Not my father, not my mother. No apology, no request for help, just the same arrogance that had always assumed I'd stay quiet no matter what. I did my own digging. Employees hadn't been paid in 2 weeks. Vendors were pulling out. And Nathan, he was vacationing in Italy, according to his girlfriend's Instagram, celebrating an engagement with a diamond ring big enough to pay 3 months' payroll. I stared at that post for a long time. The betrayal wasn't just financial, it was generational. They'd taken my inheritance and torched the very thing my grandfather built with his bare hands. And now they were watching it burn from a villa in Tuscany while pretending everything was fine. But I wasn't going to let that fire spread any further. For the first time, I didn't just feel like the forgotten daughter, I felt like the only adult left in the Sinclair bloodline. And in that moment, one idea lit up in my mind like a flare in the dark. If they wouldn't protect the legacy, I would. But on my terms and under my name. I didn't rush into revenge. I crafted it deliberately, surgically. Buying a collapsing company is easy. Resurrecting it, without alerting its dying handlers, that takes finesse. I reached out to a legal strategist I trusted from a past merger case. Together, we formed a shell acquisition firm, Avalon Partners LLC. On paper, it looked like a mid-sized group out of Chicago, specializing in distressed assets. In reality, it was me. Every dollar came from Iron Bridge profits, reinvested quietly, carefully, and without a trace linking back to me. I had one rule: no drama. I didn't want headlines. I wanted the Sinclair name back in capable hands, mine. We initiated contact through a third-party broker offering a bailout package that barely covered the debts, but sounded like salvation to my panicked parents. The board, desperate and confused, pushed the deal forward. Nathan didn't even bother showing up to the negotiations. He sent an assistant. The arrogance still ran that deep. Meanwhile, I sat in the background, watching everything fall into place. As the final contracts were drawn up, I made one last move. I arranged for the final signing to happen in person at the Denver Downtown Marriott Conference Suite 504. I wanted to look them in the eyes. When they walked into the room, they smiled at the brokers, shook hands with the lawyers, and then froze when they saw me. My father's face went pale. My mother's eyes widened like she'd seen a ghost. Nathan wasn't there. Of course not. He didn't think the acquiring firm was worth his attention. I stood, adjusted my blazer, and extended my hand across the table. "Good afternoon," I said calmly. "I'm Catherine Sinclair, CEO of Avalon. It's a pleasure to reacquire the company you lost." The silence was thick enough to cut with a knife. My father's mouth opened, then closed. My mother finally whispered, "You did this." "No," I replied, steady and quiet. "You did. The day you chose to forget whose name built that company." I didn't come to gloat. I came to finish what they couldn't. And with every signature that followed, I took back what should have never been stolen. Not just the business, my birthright. The signing ended, not with applause, but with silence. My parents left the room like ghosts, hollow shaken and stripped of the control they once clung to. I didn't follow them. I had work to do. The very next morning, I walked into Sinclair Dynamics, not as a daughter, but as the CEO. The office had changed since I'd last stepped foot in it. The walls looked cheaper, the lights dimmer, the energy defeated. I could feel the tension in every stare, every whispered conversation behind glass doors. Employees weren't sure what to make of me. Some were skeptical, others quietly hopeful. I met with every department head that day, one by one, and I didn't sugarcoat anything. "You've been lied to, underpaid, and misled," I told them. "That ends today. But if you want to stay on this ship, you need to be ready to row." I didn't fire everyone, but I did clean house where it mattered. The finance director, who signed off on Nathan's reckless spending, gone. The PR manager who covered up the pension scandal, replaced. But the head of product development, Mr. Harris, who'd been there since my grandfather's era, I gave him full control of his department, and a 25% budget increase. He cried in my office. That broke me more than anything. My goal wasn't revenge, it was resurrection. I wanted Sinclair to stand again, not for the sake of my family's name, but for the hundreds of employees who had quietly endured years of chaos. These people didn't need another power-hungry Sinclair. They needed a leader with vision, not ego. Within 2 months, we halted the financial freefall. By month 4, we were back in the black. I reinstated the original pension fund. I launched a transparent shareholder report. For the first time in years, the company saw growth, and not because of some artificial bailout, but because every decision came from someone who cared. The staff began to smile again. Emails stopped sounding like resignation letters. For the first time, this place didn't feel like my family's failed empire. It felt like something entirely new. Something I built not from inheritance or legacy, but from principle. And I wasn't done yet. Not even close. The real reckoning came 6 weeks later. My father called first, twice in one day. I didn't answer. Then came the email from my mother, the subject line trembling with guilt. Can we talk? No apologies, no accountability, just vague regrets wrapped in nostalgia. We miss you, Catherine, she wrote. You've proven your point. Let's move forward as a family. As if this had been a disagreement over dinner, not a theft of legacy and trust. I read her message 3 times, my jaw clenched tighter with each line. They didn't miss me. They missed control. They missed the quiet version of me, who never questioned their decisions. But that Catherine no longer existed. Still, I wasn't made of stone. A part of me wondered, could there be peace now that the balance had shifted? I invited them to a boardroom meeting, not a family reunion. When they walked in, they looked smaller somehow. The same people who once towered over my ambitions now sat across from me uncertain. We're glad you're fixing things, my father said. We always believed in you. I nearly laughed. No, I replied. You believed I'd keep cleaning up Nathan's messes. There's a difference. I laid down a stack of reports detailing every recovery step I'd taken, every misstep they enabled. You didn't just fail the company, I said. You failed me. Nathan never came. Word had it he'd quietly left the country again, this time to Bali, dodging both legal scrutiny and personal responsibility. It didn't matter anymore. I had no intention of dragging him back into the fold. I didn't need revenge against him. I had something far more powerful: distance, dignity, and the truth. As I dismissed the meeting, I made one final offer. You're no longer part of Sinclair Dynamics, I said. But if you truly want to rebuild this family, start with honesty. And this time, leave the money out of it. They left in silence again. But unlike before, I didn't feel rage. I felt relief. The fire had cooled. The wreckage was behind me. And the blueprint for everything I would build next, that was mine alone, drawn in scars and strength, not signatures. Weeks passed, and the silence from my family grew into something more permanent, a kind of quiet exile none of us dared break. But I didn't grieve it. In the stillness, I found something I'd never truly known before: peace. My days were filled with purpose, not proving myself. I no longer needed to ask for validation from people who measured love in usefulness and loyalty in silence. Sinclair Dynamics was no longer the crumbling relic of a once great name. It had become a blueprint for something better, ethical, inclusive, and forward-looking. I hired women who'd been passed over for years, promoted staff who had once been afraid to speak, and reinvested profits into mental health resources for employees still carrying the trauma of Nathan's era. People noticed. Investors called. Clients returned. But what mattered more than any press headline was this: we were healing. I still keep the email from my mother in a folder marked unfinished. I haven't replied. Maybe one day I will. Maybe I won't. Some wounds don't need closure to stop bleeding. Sometimes healing is walking away, without slamming the door, just locking it quietly behind you. And if my story proves anything, it's that legacy isn't about bloodlines or last names. It's about who shows up when everything falls apart, and who has the courage to rebuild brick by brick. If you've ever had to rise alone to reclaim what was yours in the face of betrayal, you're not alone. Drop a yes in the comments if this story speaks to you, And subscribe for more stories of strength, clarity, and becoming your own legacy. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply becoming everything they said you couldn't be.